The first session this afternoon is Developing Extraordinary Leaders, and it's going to be moderated by Mr. Pablo Riera. He's the chairman of the P&A group. Mr. Riera, excuse me. Great, thank you.
It's not working? Yeah. Well, hello and good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank to the organization for inviting once again, especially to Monster Charlie, for inviting once again to be part of this great event. And also I want to thanks for giving us this great moment of the day, nap time, so we don't have to make a big effort because probably most of you will be sleeping. Okay, I would like to begin with a couple of questions. They are the same questions that I made last year. It's just to see if something happens in this year. The first question is, do you really think that leadership matters? In Spain, this is yes, this is no. Yes or no? Okay. And are your companies really doing something sound, something important in terms of investing of time and money to developing leaders? This is yes, this is no. Yes? Okay. It looks like it improves a little bit since last year, because last year we had lots of people saying that leadership is a key thing, but we have not too much people telling that they were investing in leadership. And the question is, why is this happening? Why most of the people more in the HR field or corporate universities or training, of course consulting, we say that leadership is very important, but at the end we are not doing a lot of work around that. And one of the things probably is that we all, HR people, training people, development people, consultants, are trying to sell or to convince our CEOs about how nice program we have. Look to the seniority of the consultants. This is a very innovative program. But at the end, what is the thing that the CEOs really want to hear from you? Show me the money. It's not. Show me the results. And I think that one of the things that we need to change, all of us, training people, corporate universities, consultants, is to change our mindset and begin to talk about the impact that we are going to create in this company or organization, and not talking about the features or characteristics of the programming. It's not that the question that our CEOs, our leadership teams want to hear. So what I'm going to do now is to share with you just a couple of data to help you to show them the money, or show them the impact of this. This is our research that we call the Extraordinary Leader Research, and last year I was presenting the data that we got from our previous research that we had in 2008. This is the data from 2011. Well, we were working in this research for 5 years, and in the previous one, 2008, we demonstrate a correlation, clear correlation between leadership effectiveness and business results. So those companies with great leaders, with extraordinary leaders, are performing better than those ones that have poor leadership or average leadership. The methodology of the research is this one. This project was made in collaboration with one organization that already came to here. There was Oxford Side Business School. I had the pleasure to work in this project with Mark Thompson. This is a fellow in strategy and innovation in Oxford Side Business School, and of course with my friend Joy from Singer Forman. What we made is, in one hand, we assessed the leadership effectiveness of 500 managers in 100 different companies. This was made using a 360 tool that was designed by Joy. And on the other hand, what we measured was two things. In one hand, we measured the past. Because competitiveness, what is about competitiveness? Competitiveness, most of the authors say that competitiveness is the capacity of generate good results, good performance in the past and in the future in a sustainable way. So we can measure the results looking to the past, but what about the future? And most of the authors also said that the best way of having good results in a sustainable way in the future is due to innovation. So we measure these two things, 5 performance indicators in those 100 companies and the innovation within these companies. And we measure the innovation using one very well-known and reputed tool that is the European Innovation Scoreboard. It's the tool that Europe used to measure innovation in countries. And with that, we made different questions. Well, let me first talk about the impact in leadership in performance, in business performance. Well, we found that there is a clear correlation between leadership and high committed people. And this is the key, because all the rest of the results come from that. Look to the difference. Those companies where we found extraordinary leaders, best leaders, those ones in the 90 percentile, in the top 10, they have 5 times more people high committed than those ones with bad leaders, and 70% more than those ones with average leaders. And with that, we have that those companies are retaining, are satisfying more and better to their clients. Those companies are growing faster. And those companies are improving their profitability faster also than the other companies with bad or average leaders. So there's a clear correlation, a clear relationship between the quality of the leadership and the results that a company accomplished until now. Now let's have a look to the relation between leadership and innovation. Well, what we can see here is that there's a clear also relationship between leadership effectiveness and how the companies in where those leaders are working are using the drivers for innovation, or the innovation activities, if you prefer. When we see the details, we can see that the biggest difference are in 3 drivers. They are investing more time and money in lifelong learning. They are investing much more money in marketing and R&D activities. Only those companies with the top 10% leadership in their businesses are investing in average more than 5% of their annual revenue just in these 3 topics: learning, innovation, and marketing. Another thing that all those companies with great leaders, all of them, they have innovation as a key part of their strategy, their formal strategy. What happens with the innovators, with the outcomes? What are those companies taking from innovation? The differences are also higher. Those companies with best leaders are getting much more outcome from their activities around innovation than the others. And if you see this rather chart, we can see that the biggest difference are in the number of new products that are developing and introducing in the market. They are getting more profit from those products. The new revenue in more than 10% is coming for the introduction of new products in the market. And also they are reducing costs due to process innovation. So there's a clear correlation also between leadership and innovation. So there's a clear relationship between leadership and competitiveness. And how are we in Spain in competitiveness? What do you think? Not so well. In the last World Economic Forum scoreboard, Spain is number 42, and it was 33. You can see in the top Switzerland, Sweden, Singapore, United States, number 4. And Spain is together with Barbados or Puerto Rico. How are we doing in terms of innovation? What do you think? Not very well. The European Union is, in average, 22 points lower than the States and 30 points lower than Japan. And Spain is lower than the European average. We are the 17 in a number of 27. So competitiveness, innovation was more. How are we doing in terms of leadership? What do you think? Well, if we compare the average Spanish leader, and we have data from more than 500 managers assessed by more than 5,000 people, an average Spanish leader will be situated in the percentile 31 in the global index. So the difference is at 38%. Well, in all this, what is the good news here? The good news is that we have a huge opportunity. A huge opportunity not for development leaders, a good opportunity to get people more committed, to get better performance, and to have more innovative and competitive companies. Thank you. Now I'm going to present you my colleague and friend, Joy Foreman. Dr. Foreman, he's the president and co-founder of a Singer Foreman Company, our partner in the States. He's a worldwide known speaker, change agent, and consultant. He's the author of 6 books, a couple of them very well known, as The Extraordinary Leader, Turning Good Managers into Great Leaders, and also The Power of Feedback. He's one of the original designers of the 360 tool that many of you know, and he has spent more than 25 years trying to measure, improve business impact, business results through leadership and people development. He works with companies all around the world, like AT&T, ExxonMobil, Deloitte, Boeing, General Mills, MasterCard, ConocoPhillips, or Cisco. And he has a PhD in social and organizational psychology and a master in organizational behavior. It's for me a pleasure to have with me my colleague and friend, Joy Foreman.
We're going to talk a little bit about General Mills.
Hello. Do you want mine?
Okay.
Prueba.
Hello.
No, it's not working. Do you want mine?
No. I'll leave it on and then, okay. There's an electrical storm, I'm in trouble.
Now it's working.
Is that better? Thank you. General Mills, how many know of this company, their products, what they do? Here in Spain, I should tell you, they distribute Haagen-Dazs ice cream. Right, now. This is a great company, isn't it? Last week, there was an assessment done of the companies in the United States best at developing leaders. Our General Mills came out as #1 on that particular assessment. So they're acknowledged as one of the best-led organizations in the world. They've retained our services to help in the development of their leaders. These are some of their products here. So I'd like to sort of introduce you to kind of what they do, how they do it, the thought they took in terms of their leadership development process and how it worked. The first thing that General Mills wanted was a clear connection between leadership effectiveness and bottom line results. Pablo's talked a bit about this. And again, as we looked at studies that we've done, this is results from a large bank, and it's showing the intention to leave. And you notice here that if you're in the 1st to the 9th percentile, about 82% of the people are thinking about quitting. We've actually found that predicts turnover fairly well, that if you have 82% thinking about quitting, about 41% quit. So it's an interesting indicator. The best leaders only had about 5% thinking about quitting. This is an interesting study we just did recently. This looks at 170 sales leaders, and we're looking at their sales production for themselves and their team. You notice the difference between the bottom 10% and the top 10% is $500 million. That's a lot of money when you look at that leadership effectiveness. This particular study we've done over, well, really hundreds of times with different companies. And what you're looking at here is employee satisfaction or commitment and leadership effectiveness. And what you see is this wonderful trend. How many of you at some point in your career, but not currently, just in case your boss is here, have worked for a really lousy boss before? What was it like to work for a lousy boss?
It was great.
It was terrible. What else? If you work for a bad boss, you're dissatisfied, you're frustrated, you're upset, you don't like your job, and you want to leave, right? Now, if you take those people that are dissatisfied, frustrated, don't want to work for their boss and want to leave, if you pay them more money, what happens? What do you get then? Highly paid, frustrated, upset. You see, nothing works until that boss improves, and if you're average in terms of your leadership effectiveness, but if you're great. One of the things that we noted about this relationship here is we were concerned, and General Mills was concerned, because people got satisfied with being good. And we wanted to show the difference between good and great. And General Mills did a lot of work around that, and we helped them demonstrate there is a difference between good and great leaders. This is an interesting study, and of course this is results from Spain, and Pablo showed you a little bit about that. So you see that relationship between good and great. The second thing that General Mills did was looked at the key to great leadership. What makes a great leader? Now, one of the things that we looked at was sometimes people, when we measure them with 360-degree feedback, we find that about 30% have what we'd call a fatal flaw, right? And there's a difference between a weakness and a fatal flaw. How many of you here think that possibly, just maybe, you may have a weakness? Anybody have? Okay. We all have weaknesses. There's a difference. Some of them are going like this, okay. Especially the consultants, they're going, nah. Okay, there's a difference between a weakness and a fatal flaw. I travel every week. I'm in Europe this week, next week New York, the week after somewhere else, I don't know. If I go to my wife and say, honey, is there anything I can possibly do to improve as a husband, anything? What am I going to see, short list or long list? It's a really long list. And it's really bad because when I look at the list, I kind of go, well, I got to leave. I'm sorry. I can't do that. That's weaknesses. The better question for my wife are there any divorce issues that are imminent? That would be a fatal flaw, okay? Our advice to people with fatal flaws is they need to fix them. If you have a fatal flaw, which is a competency at the 10th percentile, your average effectiveness rating is the 18th percentile. But it's interesting, if you don't have any fatal flaws, but you don't have any strengths, guess what you get? 50th percentile. Average. You just get average. It's really difficult, if not impossible, for leaders to kind of move up in terms of their effectiveness if they concentrate on what's wrong, if they concentrate on their weaknesses. There's really only one way to produce great leaders, and that is by having a profound strength. People with one or more profound strengths, their average effectiveness rating is the 81st percentile. As Jack Zenger and I first discovered this, we started to understand that the key to great leadership is doing something really well and not having any fatal flaws, right? It's a combination of two things. Well, how do you do this very well? I did want to show you this particular case study that we did at General Mills. At General Mills, we looked at leaders who focused on building strengths versus those that focused on fixing weaknesses. And we had about 36 leaders that were focused on building strengths versus 83 that were focused on fixing weaknesses. What's interesting about the study is the good news. Both groups changed. We saw a significant improvement in both groups. But which groups changed the most? Which group really saw most profound strength? It was those that were focused on building strengths. One of the keys that we found to really focusing leaders on building strengths is the delta in improvement is so substantially different. And why is that? When you sit down with a leader and say, this is kind of a weakness for you, generally do they go, oh boy, I'm excited, thank you so much? Or do they go, oh no, that again, all right, I'll try. When people work on weaknesses, they're not passionate about improvement, they don't want to improve, they're basically kind of bored and frustrated. And so how much improvement you get? You get about that much, right? When people work on their strengths and they work on something that they really like, that they have passion for improvement, we find you get that level of improvement, that's about 3x times as large when people work on their strengths. So you get a lot more bang for your buck in terms of development, in terms of asking people or giving people the opportunity to work on their strengths. Now, again, working on strengths is a great idea if people don't have fatal flaws. Only about 30% at the maximum have a fatal flaw. So this last summer, General Mills came to us and they said in their international division, their senior vice president there, he said he wanted bigger, bolder, better leadership. Bolder leadership. What does that sound like to you? Kind of people that stand out, really sort of push hard. And he said, I want bold leaders. And so they came to us and they said, well, we really don't know how to tell people how to be a bolder leader or what that looks like. So the first thing we did to help them with this issue is we went to our database and we defined what bold leadership looked like. There were sort of 3 categories: results, change, and team. And you can see some of these items here. Do everything possible, achieve goals, energized and excited by taking on challenging goals, has the courage to make changes, recognizes when change needs to take place, they're willing to challenge standard approaches, create an atmosphere of continual improvement, push self and others to exceed results, and they're skillful at getting people to stretch. These are what bold leaders looked like. That's sort of the definition they had for what a bold leader looked like. Very aggressive, kind of pushy. They really were forceful, right? Does that sound like a bold leader to you? The problem is this: as you think about bold leadership, you can have this situation: high bold, low judgment and capabilities. So they're really got a lot of courage, a lot of enthusiasm, but not so good on the judgment. What we call that is dangerous, right? In that case, you say, I don't want a bold leader. I don't think that's going to help. Well, if you have this one, low bold and high judgment, well, you have the safe leader, right? They're going to make good decisions, but they're not going to push the envelope. They're not going to take risks. They're not going to do things that are out of the ordinary. So really, the combination you want is bold leaders with great judgment and high capabilities. And that would make an effective leader. So the question here was, how do you get that combination, and what does that look like? What is this effectiveness? What are the capabilities here that really work together with the capabilities there to make that possible? So we researched that a little bit. We did an analysis, but our first sort of look at it was this intuitive analysis. When you think about how somebody could be more effective as a bold leader, you say, well, speak louder. How about tell people what to do, give them orders, or make all the decisions myself? That's not it, is it? That doesn't really help. So what does help? We looked at 408,000 assessments of 28,000 leaders. Here's what we discovered. We discovered that there were a series of capabilities that when people demonstrated this bold capability, when they did these other behaviors also, the combination of the two created what we call the powerful combination. I'll show you what that is in a minute. The number one was this clear vision and direction. Actually, this is number 3. Now, you can imagine bold leadership without vision and direction, right? They've got a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy, but they don't quite know where they're going. This doesn't work. So This behavior combined with that one really created a very positive dynamic. Innovation. Bold leadership combined with innovation was another positive issue. Bold leadership combined with quickly identifies and solves problems. In other words, they had that good judgment. Or bold leadership combined with champion change. Or collaboration. This ability to get people working together as opposed to going it alone. It was the combination of these elements that created bold leadership. The top two were an interesting combination. One was the ability to inspire and motivate others. The other was the ability to drive hard for results. Those are two interesting variables, aren't they? And as you think about those two variables, I recently, several years ago, I asked my daughters, I said, what do leaders do? And they said, leaders are the bosses. They tell people what to do. They give people orders, right? And I said, how do you know that? What did you come up with that idea? And they said, well, because we're watching you, and that's what you do to us. You give us orders, and you tell us what to do. And I said, that's amazing. We call that drive for results, and we've used this word before today, push, right? Now, I was with a group of managers last week at the Institute for Nuclear Power Operators. And I asked them, how many of you, if you were challenged to push harder, how many of you know how to push harder? They all raised their hand. How many know how to give direction? They all raised their hand. How many know how to tell people what to do? They all raised their hand. Do you guys know that stuff? We find this the third most positive competency of all the competencies, right? As we measure competencies, that's the third most positive. But the other kind of way to get people to move forward is this inspiration, and we might call that pull. By the way, when we measure competencies, this is number 16 out of 16. It's the lowest rated competency. So apparently people know how to do drive, they just don't know how to do inspires. In other words, we know how to push and we don't know how to pull. Now, when some people see this message, they think the message is you ought to stop pushing and start pulling. Is that the message? It's not, and let me show you why it isn't. I'll give you the research here. If you take these two competencies, inspires and motivates others and drive for results, and let's say that this is a strength, and for a strength here we looked at leaders at the 75th percentile, but the ability to drive for results was below that. And you look at the percentage of people who were great overall, who were at the 90th percentile overall, what you find is about 10% of the population of extraordinary leaders being good at inspiring but not so good at driving. Okay? So let's do the opposite. Now, this is a strength. Drive for results is a strength, but inspires isn't, right? What percentage of leaders had this combination that were exceptional overall? How many think this is going to be higher? How do we say yes in Spanish?
Sí.
Sí. How many think it's lower? How many aren't nodding your heads? I can't tell. Well, it's 5%. Why? Yeah, it's pretty common. Everybody knows how to push, don't they? Pulling is an unusual behavior. Now, let me just suggest this. So what happens when people do both well? When they're both good at inspiring and driving? Well, we'd expect 15%, right? What do we get? A little bit more? How much? Double? 30%? 85%. Why? Yeah. So what's the message here? Should people stop pushing? No. Why not? You know what? We all need it. Do you need a push sometimes? Do you need that, you've got to get it done. It's got to be done. We all need a push. Pushing behavior is very helpful in organizations. Many of your bosses would love to hear that. Because it is really helpful. It's really important. It's the third highest competency. It's significant. It's important. Keep doing it. But, there's a but here. What's the but? You need to push and pull. You need to do both together. When you do both together, when you push hard but also pull hard, that is where you really get the key combination of bold leadership. It's the combination of pushing and pulling that creates a powerful combination. Now, it's interesting, we find these kinds of opportunities to understand this data coming out of a lot of 360 feedback that we collect. And 360 feedback is interesting because most people say, well, it's just perceptions. It is, but it's those perceptions that predict profitability, customer satisfaction. It predicts turnover. It predicts sales. All these variables, because it really is, when you get assessments from 8 to 10 people on the effectiveness of leaders, you get this wonderful variable that does predict outcomes very well. So, thank you, and this has been fun. Do we have time for questions, Pablo?
Yes, now it's your turn. If someone wants to make some question to Joy.
He will take the hard questions.
And yes, he will take the easy ones. Anyone?
So I love hearing about strength-based development, yet there is also sometimes that we're going to overuse a strength, especially when we're promoted because of some of those strengths. So what are your views or perhaps your research on overused strengths, and especially from a promotional perspective?
I just did a blog on a forum that talked about this issue of, can you overuse a strength? Or does a strength used too much become a weakness? It's such a common idea. What's interesting about it is the example we might use for this is, well, a person that drives too much, drives too hard. Can that become a weakness if you drive too hard? And oftentimes it's exactly this bold issue, right? Can you be too bold? Yeah, if you don't have these compensating competencies. But do you want to send a message out to your leaders, you know, those hard drivers? Stop driving. Back off. Don't push for results. Just take it easy out there. Is that the message you want to send your leaders? I don't think it is. I think it's the message of push hard, keep pushing hard, but the way you really are effective is when you combine that with these compensating competencies. It's the combination of things. Now, can people be too honest? Is that a problem if you're too honest? If you have too high of integrity, can you be too honest? You see, as we think about some of these things, when you think about a strength, and you think about that strength in itself, if you think about the value of that strength, it only can become a weakness when you're thinking of, kind of the negative end of it. And what we find is if people understand the balancing and really the keys to great leadership, right? We find that the best technical people, right, have interpersonal skills, right? And helping a technical person understand that really gives them the understanding of what it takes to be great. So, that answer your question? Thank you.
Okay, we have time for another question. No more questions?
There's one.
Thank you, Joe. It was very, very interesting. I don't know, it's a common question. I don't know if you get that question from other companies. But when we do assessments, and Pablo is aware of that, we've used his services also in assessing our top leadership. Often we get resistance in the sense that I've been successful so far, so without any change or the way I am. So why do I need to change? And what would be your answer to that?
I just did a study on 5,000 leaders, and I had data from 5 different organizations. What we did was we looked at the effectiveness of the top managers, the middle managers, and then the lower level managers. We found out, on average, the top level leaders were at the 74th percentile. The next level was about 10 points lower, about the 63rd percentile. And then the level below that was about the 45th percentile. Now, as we broke down these various organizations, we kept seeing a trend. We found one organization where the top leaders were at about the 89th percentile, and then it went downhill from there. And then we looked at an organization where the top leaders were at the 63rd percentile, but everything went down from there. There's a ceiling. And the top leaders create a leadership ceiling. It's a sort of a, and you know what's interesting is I tell people this and they hate it. But the probabilities are you're going to be less effective than your boss. And they hate that. I mean, it's possible that you might be more effective, but when I look at the data over and over and over again, I see this ceiling created by the next level up. The problem with senior leaders is 2 things. Number one is they set the bar. And if they don't look at how to kind of move that bar higher, they're never going to, they're going to set the ceiling for leadership because that next level tends to be less effective than they are. So that's the first problem. The second problem is, and we all know this, whenever we got a new job, we found a new set of demands, a new set of issues, a new set of frustrations, and oh my gosh, guess what? The world is changing, right? This world we live in today is so different than the world before. Your leaders need feedback, and they need it more than ever. And your top leaders, guess what? They desperately need it because people keep telling them what they want to hear, not what they should hear. The only way I know of getting them that really candid feedback is through anonymous surveys. And so as you think about that ceiling, as you think about that need for current feedback based on a new world, a different situation, I think the top management desperately, desperately needs to set the example and set the bar for the rest. So I think you guys will do that.
I want also to add that there's an organizational issue there. No? How can you convince the rest of the people, the rest of the managers, middle managers, to go through a 360, to have feedback, to have an action plan, if you are not going to have yours? This is because Jack Singer says, one person, one development plan. It's impossible if you are not being a sample, if you're not demonstrating that you are also aware and that you think that it's important to have feedback and to have an action plan to develop your skills and competencies, that you can convince nobody within the organization. Okay, it's time. Thank you very much.